Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 8th, 2018 Medfield School Committee meeting. We were just in executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. If in an open meeting, it may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body. On the agenda tonight, we'll start with public input, if anyone has anything. Approval of the minutes from December 18th, 2017. For new business, we have Permanent Building Committee. Mike Quinlan will present to us the 2018-2019 school calendar, the first draft of that, and any other items since posting on January 3rd.
We do have one.
We do have, okay, one. And then for old business, we have the fiscal year 19 budget, the student activity policy, the second reading, and any donations. We have the superintendent's report to the committee, which will include the Director of Student Services update and district recognition. For future agenda items, we have the fiscal year 19 budget public hearing, the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey presentation by Susan Cowell, the high school handbook revisions, and the new grant procedure handbook. And before we start the meeting, I just want to propose that we table the student activity policy, the second reading, because since posting that, our website has been down twice, and it was down all day today, so I don't think people
It
might
just
have
went
had.
up about 10 minutes ago.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll take that up and vote on the student activity policy at the next meeting on January 29th. Public input, does anybody have anything for us? Welcome. Where is, oh, here, you could come up to the microphone and just,
How's everybody doing? Thanks for the opportunity to talk tonight. My name is Brian Tracy. I live at Four Crest Circle, and I've been corresponding with Superintendent Marsden over the past 9 or 10 months about snow removal in my neighborhood. We're not furnished with bus service in the Belknap Estate neighborhood, and one of the reasons I moved there is very walkable, and it's accessible to the campus here, middle school and high school. But as we all know, things get really cold, and the snow comes very quickly and lasts for quite a while. And it just happened in the last couple weeks here, and it really puts a thorn in our sides, quite honestly, for the next 3 to 4 months. The 11, 12-year-olds that have to walk to school in 6th, 7th grade, there is no safe way to walk, and the town doesn't furnish any sort of snow removal on the sidewalks for these kids that live up to a mile from the school. I'm happy to work with you folks and try to figure out a way to solve this problem, but not having bus service or any sort of snow clearing from the sidewalks just doesn't seem right. I grew up in this town. And there are many neighborhoods in town that actually have bus service furnished, as well as it has the sidewalks cleared. And I'm here to, I think it's in the best interest of the town, as well as obviously the safety of the kids, to solve this problem. And if there's, I don't know what else I can do, but I'm happy to help work with the town and the DPW. To make a sort of safer path for kids to walk to school on a daily basis from January until, potentially mid-April. Yes.
so Brian, I just have a question. So where are
Sure.
they, are they going out into the street?
So they have to
because
walk
the snow
literally
is-
in the middle of the street. The banks are, 8 feet high in a lot of spots. The clearing is done, apparently, it's very clear that it's done on Main Street up to about Nebo Street.
Right.
And a lot of the neighbors see the Bobcat, then take a right onto Nebo off of Main, and take a right onto Hearthstone Drive, which is sort of the spine of the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
And you just cruise down the middle of the street, not doing any clearing there, to get to the path
Right, the
between
cut-through.
the cut-through, exactly, from Hillcrest through.
Where you run for the Angel Run, that has been
Right.
cleared. but-
Exactly. Well,
Okay.
yeah, it's
yeah.
it's supposed to be cleared. I don't know if it's always
But
cleared,
it's-
but it should be cleared for sure, at a minimum.
yeah.
But at the same time, these kids are walking in the middle of the street. Things have changed over the number of years. There's a lot of delivery trucks, oil trucks, garbage trucks, Amazon trucks, unfamiliar with the neighborhood. And I don't know what else to do. Dr. Marsden, in your response, you mentioned that there's not enough space for the equipment that the DPW uses.
So a day in November, Michael and I went up to that whole, we walked the entire neighborhood with Bobby Kennedy and Mo Goulet, and really try to get a sense of what it looked like, because I had brought Brian's concern to the DPW. We walked through that whole neighborhood, and one of the concerns the DPW had was that they need 51 inches between telephone poles and mailboxes, and they don't have that there. That's what they expressed to us, that there was a concern around that they would be taking everyone's lawn out as they went through, or they just couldn't make it by there, so they weren't comfortable doing that. They feel like they couldn't. You know, Brian made a really good point in his initial email to me, is that, you know, they do South Street Extension, Indian Hill, those areas where they get bus service, yet where the kids have to walk, you know, there's no sidewalks done. So we left that meeting on the 21st of November, and what the DPW said they would do is make sure that area by the cul-de-sac, that by the Angel Room when you come in behind, that area will always be clean, and they'll widen that a little bit and try to get the hills down there. That was the because we do up to a certain point, this school-owned land, and the town does that part out to the road. So that's how they left it. I know it wasn't, as I said to Brian, I don't have great news for you when I sent him the email, but that was what they felt they could handle at this point.
How's the shoveling law?
I don't know if there is one.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a Board of Selectmen question. I know in my neighborhood, if you've got kids walking to the bus stop, we each clear the sidewalk in front of our house.
Yeah, and honestly, it's maybe 10% of folks cleared their sidewalks, and that's, you know, I wish it was higher than that.
It's kind of a culture issue.
No,
You have
not
to
at
go
all.
up sidewalk, then road.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah,
do a
yeah.
lot, yeah.
So you know, I don't know what other pieces of equipment the DPW has, but I would imagine 51 inches is
for a
pretty
Bobcat.
wide.
Yeah.
So if they can't use the Bobcat, do they have other pieces of equipment that they could use for this? It's a mile stretch to have a kid walk a mile or close to that. You know, seems unacceptable and a serious hazard, obviously, right?
So is this something that, you know, we could, or you as a board could do, send a note to the Board of Selectmen, ask them to look at, because it really isn't your purview, right? I mean, it's
Right.
something we could do in terms of setting policy around that, but is it something that? we
I'm
could-
certainly happy to support a motion on
Right.
that, although I know, well, I think I know all the members of the Board of Selectmen. I think they react better hearing from a coalition of neighbors who have this issue, I think.
Sure, so-
We're happy to support those efforts, because I agree. I mean, it's a safety issue. So I'm
Do
not
you know
sure.
if there are other neighborhoods in town that have this same issue?
There aren't that many walking.
There aren't that many,
neighborhoods.
yeah.
There aren't that many,
Yeah.
and I've seen, you know, just being over in Wheelock, they seem to clear down Elm Street. I don't know if there's any walkers on Elm Street. I mean, the kids are 7 years old, so
Right.
I can't imagine that. And the center of town is pretty clear, and there are sidewalks in Pine Little Park that get cleared, and I think they have bus
Yeah,
service
I
as
know,
well.
it's actually odd. I live in Pine Needle Park, and they do stop a good.
They do I mean, I'm down Green Street, and they go on Flintlock, right?
But it does seem to me that it'd be, yeah, they kind of go down Green Street and then they go over, whatever that cross street is, Cypress.
Yeah,
And then back down.
right.
And stop. I always kind of wondered why they stopped, but I also always kind of wondered why they plowed all the way up there.
Right.
So,
Right. So if there's some reallocation of resources to help with this potentially, I don't know, but if you think a petition or something like that,
I mean, I think the Board of Selectmen, they respond pretty well to public input, and I think if they hear from, just like we do, you know, we hear from a group of first grade parents who are concerned about class.
Sure,
size. You know,
sure.
We're paying attention to that, we care about it. I think the selectmen are paying attention to snow removal and care about it, but if they, you know, particular issue comes to their attention, and, you know, if you think it would help, I'm pleased to move that we, you know, write a letter to alert them to the issue, but I do think they react better to hearing from their constituents and voters.
sure. So I
than
you know, I
from-
figured this is for the school age folks trying to get to school, so I figured the school committee would be the
But
right
we-
stop.
We
Right.
could say that we are hearing from people, from school-age parents,
Yes.
and we are concerned that this is a safety hazard, and
Mhm.
they
That's
should,
certainly
they
true, yeah.
should prioritize
Right.
those people who have to walk from than other places.
And they're certainly aware of the bus routes and where we have walkways.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and I
Well, I
do,
mean, the DPW is.
And
And
if
I
they
do
get a
think
buy, I
that it
can't believe they
becomes-
can't buy custom equipment to do that. I don't know what that deal is, but I just, if that's what the problem is.
and I do think it's concerning that these are our students who are then walking in the road, you know, probably like you said, the students who are more likely to walk are the older kids, the 12, 13-year-olds, who are now in the middle of the road,
at 7
who
in
might
the
be
morning.
on a phone or this or
Right.
that, who
Ab-
are less likely to be paying attention sometimes than the 8-year-olds walking that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that.
But people are flying at 7:15 a.m.
Yeah, they
to
are,
get to
'cause
work.
they're trying to get to
And
work,
when you
they're
have
trying to get their
snowbanks this
kids-
high,
yeah.
it's,
And they're trying to get their kids to school on time, so they're flying down, and the snowbanks are so high.
So why don't we do, Madam Chair, I don't know if you want to do it by motion or consensus, but if you could send a letter on our behalf, and I'm sure Dr. Marsden can let the folks, I'm sure, he's already been in touch with
Right.
DPW,
Mhm.
you don't wanna surprise them with that. Just, let them know that we've got this issue, we're not sure the best way to handle it.
Right, and I think there are always some creative solutions, even if it's not a Bobcat. I think that something obviously
you-
for safety
I would hope
kids.
so, yeah.
Yeah, you'd think,
Yeah.
right, right. So I think that that's probably a great idea, just a little,
that'd be
little-
helpful, sure.
Thank you for bringing
well,
this
thank
forward.
you, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
I
you.
Brian.
hope we get some good melt this week.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything for public input part? Chris?
Chris Potts on Curve Street. I just wanted to, after being here for a prior meeting, to get a quick snapshot of what the budget will potentially look like for FY, for the next budget cycle. I just wanted to express a little bit of concern that I don't believe there's been enough in-depth discussion about how to respond to the declining enrollment that's going to hit Blake next year, and honestly, and in the past as well, and in terms of it coming through the district. I think that, it seems like there's already been a conclusion made that we're going to have to look at staff reductions, possibly moving, hoping that staff will move from, teaching 6th grade to teaching 2nd grade or 3rd grade, and really making difficult decisions, including the possibility of doing away with the cluster model. I think the one thing, too, that we had a really rich discussion at the Parent Advisory Council meeting, and that was around the whole school choice option. And I feel like that is something that should have been discussed a little bit more in depth before we've gotten to this point where all of a sudden the recommendations on the table are making these very difficult decisions. I also noticed that in November, there were a couple districts, at least a couple districts that I found that actually put the school choice vote on their school committee agenda, both in Melrose and Abington in November. And I can only assume that it was for budget reasons, to be projecting for what the next school year is going to be like and have enough information so that they could be more thoughtful about how they're going to approach various issues with enrollment. I don't really have a personal opinion one way or the other about the school choice at all. I don't really know a whole lot of details about it other than what Dr. Marsden has shared at different points in terms of, we do have the ability to designate if we need students in 6th grade or 7th grade, we do have the ability to limit it to that. I know that there's an issue of siblings, having to have first priority. I also know that tuition money is only covers 75% of the per student cost. There are a lot of different issues around this, so I will never profess to be an expert on school choice. I just feel like it would be really helpful to have a rich discussion about the various options for tackling this enrollment issue that was going to be hitting the 6th grade. And I feel like we're not being as, to wait to the public budget hearing to do that is not really the greatest time to do that. I also realize, too, that, according to the state law, every district is supposed to have a public hearing on the school choice issue on June 1st. And we have not, in the 3 years that I've been coming to school committee meetings, we have never had a public hearing on that. And in fact, when the vote was taken last time, it was taken on June 5th. And what I also found interesting, going back and looking at the tape of that meeting, was that the other part of that is that as of May 1, prior to that meeting, our school committee is required to submit a report to the Mass Department of Education documenting the capacity of each school, the number of students expected to attend each school, the number of additional seats available to non-residents under the program if we're to participate. And that when our school committee voted not to participate in the school choice, the partial reason that was publicly stated at that meeting was that it didn't make sense, given class sizes and space, especially at the elementary schools. And then following that vote, a report is supposed to be submitted to the Department of Education stating the reasons for not participating in school choice. So I have two concerns here. One is that there wasn't the public hearing that was supposed to take place about the school choice issue in advance to look at what we could possibly do budget-wise to deal with the declines in enrollment as they're going through. But then it also just seems like there was knowledge about the class size issues at the elementary level in May. And then also in August, there was a report that was given to school committee about, with more details about enrollment for that particular school year. So I'm just a little confused about knowledge of class sizes with regard to elementary being so high. And if there's a school policy with a recommended number, then why wasn't that also discussed when these various reports were presented to the school committee? So those are my questions. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have anything they want to add? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from December 18th, 2017.
Madam Chair, I've reviewed the regular and executive session minutes for December 18th, and I recommend they be approved as submitted.
All in favor?
Aye.
So the next item on the agenda is the Permanent Building Committee presentation by Mike Quinlan.
Thank you and good evening. I'd like to start off just by thanking Dr. Marsden and Michael LaFrancesca for getting us to this point with the Dale Street School project, and I'm sure you've had help within your administration. It's certainly not a small effort. Basically, here tonight, we just wanted to go through the MSBA process and where we're going to go from here. This is really just getting started and ramped up. And if you look at the slide to my left, we're basically starting what's called the eligibility period, otherwise known as Module 1, which has certain stipulations to be able to move into the next phase, which is where we really ramp things up and bring on a team, et cetera. And the majority of that gets handled largely by the administration in terms of initial compliance certification, some enrollments, et cetera. But the main thing that I'm here to talk to you about really is the school building committee and the makeup of that committee and how we will proceed as we move into the next phase. Sorry, this is a little squished, but basically the MSBA stipulates certain roles be filled on all their school building projects, of which we've begun to assemble the names that would fill those positions. And largely be made up of the current permanent building committee, the town of Medfield, of which I chair. And I should note that Tim Bonfatti also serves on that committee as well, serving multiple hats. So the first, just going through the different roles, a school building committee member who is MCPPO certified, that has to do with procurement law really. I am MCPPO certified, as is Tim and Jerry McCarty, but they're filling in some other roles as well, so we'll go through that. Local chief executive officer, that would be an appointee by the Board of Selectmen as the chief executive body for the town of Medfield. So they will vote to appoint one member. The town administrator or manager, Mike Sullivan, or should he so choose, an appointee, whether it be Christine or someone. A member of the school committee, which a minimum of one. So we'd basically be looking at this point to have you appoint one member, largely because Tim is serving as well, also on the committee as a permanent building committee member. And we don't want to end up with a school committee forum. So that's quorum, sorry, not forum. At every building committee meeting and have it posted and all of that. And the superintendent, Dr. Marsden, local official responsible for building maintenance, that would be our director of facilities, Jerry McCarty, representative of office authorized by law to construct school buildings. The Permanent Building Committee represents that authority. We have 5 members, of which Tom Erb we've labeled for this particular position. School principal would be Stephen Grenham. Member with knowledge in educational mission and function of facility, we have Michael LaFrancesca. Local budget official or member of local finance committee, this would be an appointee from the warrant committee. Members of the community with architecture, engineering, and/or construction experience, Tim Bonfatti. And then we have 2 other members of the building committee, Walter Kincaid and Mike Weber, who would also round out that committee. So we're in the process of sort of assembling this, and basically we'd be looking for you to appoint 1 member at this point to the building committee. Any questions?
So, go ahead, Chris.
I was just gonna say, it's foregone conclusion that our appointee would be a voting member, right?
That hasn't been decided. I think that's open for discussion, absolutely.
Who decides it? Is it us that decides it, or is it this committee that decides it? or-
I think that would ultimately, yeah, I think our original intention was to have, at the very least, the 5 building committee members would be voting members, as it's kind of our charge to manage building projects. And with the trying to avoid getting too large of a voting body where you have trouble getting quorums and things like that, we thought that either A, it would be only the 5 building committee members, or we would have an appointee from the school committee and most likely the Board of Selectmen as another 2 voting members, bringing the voting total to 7. Ultimately, there's not a lot of items that really, the committee will be moving forward with a consensus basis. And there's not a lot of things that we think will really be any controversy in terms of voting. But certainly we would welcome, if the school committee felt they needed a vote in the whole process, then by all means we can include that.
What has been typical in your experience in the past?
Well, so, what we find, and Mike addressed this, that if there's too many voting members, because this committee is a very working committee.
Yeah, it meets a lot.
It'll meet a lot, and if you don't have a quorum, a lot of the votes are pro forma, approving invoices, minutes, that kind of thing. If it's too big of a voting body and you don't have quorum, you end up stymied trying to do business. So, I think having 7 voting members is fine, because the quorum is pretty easily set at 4 or whatever, and, but I think it's important what Mike said, and we do a lot of this work, so we know kind of the dynamic of how those committees work. It's a very consensus-oriented committee, and there's very few, you have to take some official votes, which a lot of them are laid out in that chart that we had. But it's essentially mostly a consensus, and it's a working committee in some ways, in terms of, it's kind of a board of directors type working, but it works through issues. And I don't know that it's such a big deal whether you're a voting member or not, to be honest. So,
I feel like the school committee has, if we are weighing in at all on this building process, then we have a responsibility to back up our decisions. And that, for that reason, I would think that a vote would be important.
well, and I don't think, we don't have a problem, we've talked about this, at the building committee level, just to be being mindful of, if it's too big, we
Right.
really will struggle getting it operational. So adding 2 voting members is not a problem for us. There are more than 2 additional people on that committee, so we'll have to figure out who the 2 are. But school committee's role, by the way, just when we do get into the program, the school committee's role in terms of approving the educational plan and setting the educational is the preeminent role. So that's, the building, technical part of it, building the building, is the building committee's role. But the actual educational mission, how the building ultimately would serve that mission, in terms of, the structure of delivering the education, is the school committee's role. So that's not a building committee's role. So the things that I think we would have mostly interested in would be school committee decision anyways.
That's clarifying, thank you.
I did just want to, before we leave it, I did want to, Well, I actually did want to nominate Mary Ann for the school committee role, because we do need to get an appointment.
Second that.
And then I did want to make a comment on this process, but actually,
So all in favor of that, I think?
aye.
Okay.
This process, so if you look at that process, the top line, which is what Mike mentioned is the eligibility period, is essentially done, we think probably likely, given the pace of it, will be voted at the board, MSBA board, to enter into the second line, Module 2, probably in the fall. That's kind of how I think it's gonna end up, and as you can see, the last conclusion of that line is the local authorization of funding. That relates to going to the town meeting in April to appropriate the $1.5 million of feasibility money that we're going to be doing. There's two votes that the town has to take. One is the feasibility funding at 1.5 million, and then the second vote is the whole final big vote, the project vote. So, you know, and just to sort of set expectations, the MSBA has done, I think, actually a great job in terms of taking what was not a very well-structured program, and Medfield benefited from some of that back in the high school project, because we were in the transition between the old MSBA and the new MSBA. They funded a lot of money to pay off all their commitment to us in one lump sum, but a lot of communities, the way that program was set up was you weren't getting funding for years, dozens of years. And so the MSBA now is a pretty well-run organization. They know, they've developed, they have construction, they have project, design and construction professionals. They really know how to make sure that, I think, projects are efficient. You see very few kind of Newton North stories anymore, the blow-up projects, because they've done a good job of creating a structure that is really, a best practice in terms of how you should develop complex capital projects. But it's very time-consuming, and they're very, they elongate a process considerably just with their review process. So while that's a benefit to some extent, people should not have any illusions about how fast this will take. So if you take that second line, I did just kind of a quick sketch out of what the time frame will be to get through each one of those modules. And it's probably, to get to the end of that line is probably 18 months, just to get to that funding the project, the next town vote after the fall. The next set of modules to get to occupancy, which is, say, the end of Module 7, we're probably talking about an additional 30 to 40 months. So we're really talking 4.5 years before 4 to 5 years, fall of 2022 or 23, before there's a new school for kids or whatever the decision is for students to go to. So just to kind of set that expectation, this doesn't happen very quickly in the MSBA program.
So we have a deadline for local authorization for the 1.5 million, right?
We do.
Does that have to go to the voters, or is that gonna be just town meeting? That's really.
Depending on
that's
how it's
Yeah, how
appropriated,
structured.
but I think the plan right now is that it will be a debt exclusion override, so that would require both town meeting vote and a ballot.
And are they hoping to do that on the regular, on the regular election cycle, or do a special election after town meeting?
I don't think it's gonna be on the regular election
I don't think they'll
cycle.
get it on a regular election cycle. It's
No.
too quick.
Yeah.
So, just so that I can clarify.
I don't know, I shouldn't speak. I don't know whether they.
Yeah, we haven't really fully had that discussion. In terms of a deadline, if you're concerned about that, there's plenty of time. The actual eligibility period doesn't start for us till April 2nd. So we have 270 days from that point to actually complete everything. And we highly expect that we will do it in less time than is required.
So-
But includes getting that funding vote, so
Right.
if we wait 270, unless we do a special town meeting in the fall,
Right.
we have
Last spring,
huh?
or in the spring.
Right, but 270 days from April 2nd, or delay a year. In other words, we
Well-
want to hit this
Aren't we
spring.
putting up
No, I meant
this
if we didn't,
on the
Oh, yes,
docket?
On the
the
if
annual
it was
town
special
meeting.
Yeah.
after the
Then
annual
you have to
town
vote.
meeting, if you did a special election.
You could, yeah.
Right.
Right
May
then, yeah.
advance the timeline.
yeah.
In terms of the ballot question,
Yes,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But that vote wouldn't be, so this, if if at town meeting, the town approves the 1.5, that initial, then you have, it has to go on a ballot for a special election in the fall.
No, it
Could be
would.
right
It could be, it could be
Right
the week
after.
after.
Ideally, you wanted it close
Yeah,
in
you want it
time,
close.
because
Okay.
people have learned about it, they've been educated
Yeah.
around it.
The last time we
That's
did
it.
this with, when we approved the DPW, I think that was the last time we had them back to back.
Right.
We actually had, because there was an election, a national election to fill some seat, or it may have been state, but there was already an election in place. So we piggybacked it, and it was 1 week after town meeting, and it doesn't necessarily need to be that close, but having it close helps because it's an issue
Right.
that's in front of the voters,
You don't lose your
and
momentum.
you want the people who come to vote at town meeting to show up
To
at the
show up.
ballots.
And our town meeting is late this year.
Thank God.
Yes.
Is it? Later than
It's
April.
typically the Monday after April vacation, and now
Right.
it's the week after that.
If
Yeah.
it's a special town election, then it would be, it could be scheduled for whenever we needed it to be.
Okay.
So I'm not aware of any other elections that are outstanding.
No, unless you end up with some kind of special election or something
Right.
else.
Probably should be something that we talk about quickly with, because if we're gonna try and make the March election, it would move quickly.
Yeah, that's the alternative, would be to have the ballot question actually become before town meeting. And that would be putting
I
it
don't-
on the town. The concern there is that information is not distributed as quickly as needed to get that kind of,
Yeah,
that level of.
education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not a great, it's not a
That
great
seems
one.
like putting the cart before the horse, right?
I
Yeah, a little bit, it
A little
feels
bit
like
of
that,
that, but
yeah.
it's more, I don't want anyone to feel like this is being rushed through.
Right. Yeah, that
Um,
never goes well.
No.
From my perspective, though, I mean, and this has been an issue in the town for a long
Yes,
time.
yep.
Correct.
Everybody's aware of it, and I'm not sure, frankly, there's not that much information to give, because you don't have plans to
Right.
vote on, you don't have any, this is just a
It's
matter
true.
of, we need 1.5 million to start a process where we'll get, was it 40% of the building reimbursed?
39.84.
So who's counting?
But who's counting?
I'm not sure, I mean, there are discussions about whether, I guess there are reasonable people could disagree about whether anything should be done with that building. But that's the only real
Which
discussion.
reasonable people?
That's the only- But otherwise, to me, this is, especially in a town like Medfield, is a no-brainer. I'm not sure, if there's a benefit to the town in terms of moving the process forward to getting this on the annual election, and I know there are some tricky issues with campaigning.
Mhm.
Somebody would have to set up a committee to do that.
Right.
Then I'm not sure why we wouldn't do that, or have a special election immediately after town meeting.
Right after,
The day
right.
after town meeting.
Right.
I mean, I've seen a lot of towns do that, we've done it very quickly on the
Yeah.
heels in the past. There's just there's a modest.
It's, yeah, my
$15,000.
understanding is it's in the range of $6,000 to $10,000
Yeah,
to
run
do,
it.
to hold
To
the
run
election.
it.
So the question is that monetary value worth, a little bit more time or not? Like, if it's worth saving that much money, then to try to get it into March for the regular town election.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, what more information will we have?
Oh, that's true.
There's not, all we know
Mhm.
is that we've been invited. That's all we will know, whether we have this special town meeting in,
Right.
or whether we have a special election, or have an election in March, or have a special election in November. The universe of our knowledge isn't gonna change,
So from
and it's really small.
From my perspective, just from the sort of building committee perspective, the only thing I'd be concerned about would be the voters understanding what the money's being spent on.
Which town
Rather
meeting
than
affords
just-
you that option?
What's that?
Town meeting affords you that option. to
Correct.
do that.
Correct.
And
And it does
presentation.
reinforce the need. I mean, we think everyone knows there's a need. That's the one thing you would be able to educate people on more, is the need.
I don't expect it to be hugely controversial, but that doesn't mean that, people aren't gonna have questions that they
Yeah, I
would
mean, a
like answers to.
$50 million vote somewhere down the line.
Right.
Will be hugely
That's
controversial.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Correct.
I must say, I think that, not that I'm saying, $6,000 to $10,000 isn't a big, big deal, that if you could save that money, but I also think you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. You're talking about a really important and massive project with millions of dollars, that I
The
just
risk-
think that if you go to town meeting like we've done with other big building projects, and you can make a presentation, you can field questions from some of the people that might not be as aware as we are, listening to school committee meetings and having children in the school, that for those people, I think it is worthwhile to make a presentation, to show a little bit of this, a little bit of understanding about timelines, what the money is used for. I just think it's,
Yeah, I
and then
mean,
have an election,
A little
is
bit,
my
it's a
opinion.
little academic, because I don't get to vote on when we have an election, when we
Right.
don't. I'd have to run for selectman to do that, and that's not happening. So, way ahead of the fast, the room is on fast.
Vote for you.
But, you know, that's just, I mean, that's the concern I have, is that it not go past the summer, because I think
Right.
we
No,
wanna.
right.
once
And
you
I don't
have
think that's our
momentum, then
intention
you have
either.
to keep
I
it.
think the real risk, in my eyes, the only risk in trying to put it through quickly, is for some reason, if some people feel like they haven't had questions answered and they don't have the support, the risk of it getting voted down and then having this whole process, you know, just thrown out because of that is not worth it to me, to just add a few more weeks and a few $1,000s to really kind of make sure people understand exactly what we're asking for.
And I
I
think
agree.
after post-public safety building.
Yes.
I think, you know, everyone calling it the Taj Mahal and whatnot, I just think.
I don't remember
that.
I don't call it that.
Yeah.
But I think making assumptions that the town will support it is just a bit too much, and I think post-public safety building, people just will have a bit, will have more questions, and I think we should, be able to.
And this
respectful.
process will be as transparent as we can possibly make it. We want to make sure that that's where, because of the importance of this project. This
And
is-
And
there's
I-
a benefit to having it after
Right.
town meeting, in that school resources can be expended to get the information out to people if it's a town meeting issue.
Right.
And I do think that is a good point, that if you have it before the town meeting, then it can raise questions about, well, why are they trying to rush this through, or, and so I think that if you kind of do it in a, you know, a more laid out, systematic, thank you, my senior moment, a systematic way where people can, you know, ask questions if they have concerns, or voice their concerns, that people are listening to what they have to say in the feasibility study when we're asking for this money. I think that people are more likely to believe that you're doing the right thing when you ask for considerably more money. So I think that it is an excellent use of the extra however many thousands of dollars for a special election, when we're going to be asking for, you know, millions of dollars later on. I just think it's a more thoughtful process, so.
Mike, you don't, or Mike and Tim, you don't think, we don't get to module 5 in time for next year's town meeting?
No.
That's just not happening.
No.
I think,
I do have one question. There is a magnesium planter. Is there another possibility or a debt override coming that we know of on the warrant for town meeting that we know of at this point, with the water and sewage plant?
I'm unaware of that. I can't answer that.
I know that that's been rattling around
Yeah.
for a while.
It seems like every year there are a few rattling around. You know, I know you guys are familiar with that too, but I can't answer that question. I feel a lot of times at this stage of the warrant, there's a lot of things that get thrown on there that never make it to town meeting. So,
Well, I appreciate you doing that. As you know, I've been through a lot of this process, and I don't envy all the work ahead of you. So thank you both, all three of you for doing it.
And thank you for the presentation,
No
thank
problem.
you.
Can I ask just a quick question? Will there be a flyer that would go out to the general public explaining, because we're talking about all these questions that people might have, and could that be attached to the school budget that's going to be mailed out in advance of town meeting anyway, so that it wouldn't cost as much? I mean, is that something?
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we voted last year not to.
Right, not to
mail
do
it
the
this
the
year.
mailer.
But-
Oh, right.
We may revisit
but
that, I mean,
Where
with
it's a
this.
town,
With
where it's a
this?
town
With this,
meeting
I think
issue,
it's-
then we can do it with school resources. If it's just if what I was suggesting happened, we couldn't necessarily do that.
Mm.
If there was an election before town meeting,
Right.
it gets fuzzy, but certainly the school committee, the school department will push all the information out.
Tim and Mike, just actually another question too. This came up, I don't think there was a clear answer to this at the last meeting where this was discussed. what is the, when and how does the public input portion of this take place with regard to the educational component? Does that happen first among the school committee and then get fed into the school building committee? Or does the school building committee work with, like what's the chicken coop egg? Like what's the sequencing of when the public input piece happens? Not on the building, but on the educational committee.
Yeah, and I think the school committee is probably the best to answer how that would work.
The educational plan happens in the module 3, that feasibility study. So it's long before a building. And so the way, I'm sure, the way these are successful and the way we would do it, and the way the building committee has done things in the past, so it wouldn't change, is it would be a series of community forums and sort of input around that issue before even you've defined what a building would look like.
Has the MSBA by that point already made the recommendation with respect to build or renovate?
No.
No,
They wouldn't at that point?
No.
nope. That's
Everything-
part of the
so-
feasibility
So the
study.
feasibility study, so the educational plan is pretty much the very first thing you do. You also look at all the different options around town that have to look at in the feasibility study. And that gets a separate submission in that module 3. And then after they comment on that, they don't really approve it, but then you then define sort of using, that educational plan is how you finalize a new construction option or an ad reno but that's first, the educational plan.
So that educational plan then is gonna be part of a component of the feasibility, and the public forums be part of the feasibility study?
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah. It'd probably be one of the first things would be a kickoff forum even.
Mhm.
It's a very transparent, it'll be a very open and transparent process because it's a huge investment. And they're not successful if people don't feel that there's been a very
I just wasn't
transparent
sure of the
process.
sequence, sweet
Yeah.
sequence.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks,
And-
Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
So the next item on the agenda is the school calendar, the first draft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your packet, is a very, very rough draft of 2018-19. Very, excuse me, very similar to what we've had in the past in terms of holidays, et cetera, and vacations. Excuse me. The thing I'd like to bring up this evening and just talk a little bit about is looking at our early release days. One of the things that we'd like to do going forward in 18 and 19 is to increase our early release days for professional development from the current 5 we have now to 7 next year. And, part of the reason behind that is that we do some professional development during the day, and we call them job embedded days. And, the teachers do a great job with it. They're really well used. The issue that we run into is that it's difficult for teachers to be out of the classroom for a full day or a half day, and then getting subs for that is also difficult. So that this would eliminate that, giving some more time, additional time on release days to do some of that professional development, do some of that teamwork, whatever they're working on as either department or a grade level team. And it will save us money with looking at substitute teachers. And then, it's really difficult, especially at the elementary level where you have to write out all your plans all day for a sub. It takes a lot of time. I mean, teachers will spend up to 2 hours just kind of writing all that out for the substitute for the next day. This would eliminate that. So again, it puts it 2 additional release days, but we feel like professional development-wise, it would be a better use of time. And then, of course, save money for the district as well.
And be less disruptive for the kids in the classroom.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think that they really do miss their teachers and they feel that disruption.
So, I think if you look at some other communities that have early release every single week, or they have it every week, we're not looking at that. We're looking at just adding 2 additional release days, so it would come out to be 1 a month except for June and September. And then, we look at, looking at how we would do it, whether teams would work together at secondary level, grade levels of the elementary. We'd figure all that out through our professional development plan. But we wanted to kind of float that this evening and look at the time. So administratively, we've talked about it. I've had a meeting with the association leadership. They're supporting that as well. So I just wanted to get some reaction and some feedback. Tomorrow at our leadership meeting, we're gonna start plugging in some of these days. Excuse me, because we had to work around some things like Nature's Classroom and some other, so we have to work around that. So we didn't input any of the release days that we were thinking about, but we want to just put them on the right-hand side so you get a sense of what that looks like.
So the only question I have is, a few years ago, before we extended the day,
Yeah.
the time on learning.
Mhm.
So that, obviously, they need not even, 180 days, but you need 900 hours and
Right.
all of that, that as long as we're
Yeah,
not
so we,
getting close
so
to that
we
with
make that.
presentations and all that kind of thing.
Right, one of the things we'd have to look at, because we're pretty good with that, the elementary, we just barely make it in secondary
Right.
level. We just barely make it at the middle school and high school. In fact, at the middle school, we don't even make it to be considered a middle school, we never have. So that's something that we can address in future years, but we don't make the 990 that's required as
That's
a
part
middle
of the-
school. But middle
part of
school
the
can.
discussion about start time.
Right,
Mhm.
yeah, so middle school can be considered, you can classify it as a middle or high, or an elementary school when you're looking at the 900 or 990. High schools have to be the 990. We just barely make it. So we look at possibly making the release days, maybe a half hour later in terms of the release, because they get out 11:10 at the high school, make that
Okay.
11:40, and a little
Okay.
afternoon time for elementary to kind of gain that time back. So that's something we would consider as well, so we wouldn't lose that time.
Okay.
We're fine elementary-wise, it's secondary that we have.
Would that work with the buses?
I'm sorry?
Would that work with the buses?
It'll work with the buses, yeah. It's only a half-hour
Oh, right,
differential
right.
on release days with the buses. As Robert has told me numerous times, we have one of the shortest high school days around, so we have to look at that in the future as well, I'm sure, but.
We could add a study and extend.
Well, I mean, I think that's some of the conversation out of
Right.
the SEL task force, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's,
Hope so.
yeah, that's part of the conversation coming out of that.
Well, I think, as Jessica said, it is very disruptive, especially the elementary school students, and I hear a lot.
Mhm.
This is, so,
Mhm.
where are they? Oh, they had another meeting or something or other, so.
And we've reduced that in the last 3 years, so I remember my first year here, getting some of the numbers and looking at the data, it was a lot more. So we reduced those numbers down, and, part of adding that additional curriculum meeting in the contract last time was to give teachers that hour a month to do that work, but reduce it from being away from their students, so.
And they still have significant obligations in terms of team meetings, IEP meetings, and other.
No question.
things like that. So
Right.
to be able to kind of alleviate this particular part, I
Mhm.
think would be very helpful.
The one thing I noticed, I thought December 21st, that seemed kind of mean to have the teachers stay longer. When it's that early release for the students.
Right, so that's early release, teachers get out early that day
That's
too.
not professional.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, that's early release for them,
We're
yeah.
making them
That's
work
great to
then?
get
Yeah.
Let's say.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's a different, so you're gonna add some
So you
kind
have
of
to look at, some
professional
of them say
development,
professional
another
development,
half
some
day.
just say early release.
Okay,
All
all
right.
right.
So this
Sorry,
is
I
a
got
date
confused.
not yet determined.
Right,
for
so
the
December,
professional
there would
development, so
be.
there'd be 2 early releases in
Right,
December.
Right, so we have to put that in there, there's no date on that calendar.
Our contract's what, 183 days?
84,
184.
Okay.
yeah.
So
So
we
one
get,
of the.
we get a day back this year because Good Friday falls over April vacation.
Right.
Which is great.
So one of the things that, we will have to look at, if you remember that December 21st day was one of with the agreement we made with extending the elementary day. That the day before the winter break at that point will always be a half day for teachers and students. So that was part of it. So that works out well for everyone.
So you said 7, but not in September or June.
Right.
There's so many in September days up.
Yeah, so if you look at September, we don't have a full week of
You don't have
school
a full
until
week.
the 24th.
The holidays.
Yeah,
Okay.
the holidays in there.
That's, yeah.
Can you do? Unless-
Okay, so you wouldn't do December either then?
We would do December.
2 in December.
Yeah, we would do December.
October, November, December, January?
No, see, look
I have 8.
at the yellow.
So 2
Oh, it
early
just dates
release
off.
days
Yeah,
in
so some of them are
December
early.
with vacation.
Okay.
Right. Because that one early release day is
Is,
the
right,
start of
okay.
vacation. So there are
So then
early
December
release
would only
days,
have
and then there's
one
professional
full
development
week.
days.
So it's April, you wouldn't have one in it.
No.
Correct, because there's a full day off in April. That's,
But-
that's a full day teacher professional development day.
But then I wonder, December, you only have one full week of school in December? That could be a bit of torture. Only one full week.
No, you have two.
Nope, if you
Not if you
add
have a
two
half day.
profession, if
So
you
you have
add
to add
two
one
early release
release day in
days.
there. Yeah, we'd have one
Because
release
the
day in there.
21st is an early release, you have the vacation
Yeah.
week, and you'd have either the week of the 3rd or the week of the 10th would have an early release.
And are you talking about, Jeff, doing these, the same day of the month every,
So that's one of the things that we're
second
talking
month,
about.
or-
So if,
That would be very helpful for parents.
so here's the thing. If you do it the same day of the month educationally, then kids are missing the same thing all the time. However, if we
Unless
could,
you schedule things.
we could do it the same day of the month and go on a 5-day rotating schedule instead of always going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So if you went as the first day is day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and you went on a day schedule, a day number schedule instead of a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you could have it on the same day of the week for parents. You could do it that way.
But you
So-
just substitute, that's gonna be a 2-day, it's gonna be a 3 days.
Right, right. So, I mean, lots of places operate that way.
Well,
A
that's
6-day
how we
rotation,
have,
5-day rotation.
Days off on Mondays, and then
Yeah.
some kids at Dale never had art, an
Right.
entire term.
Right.
Because it was
Yeah.
always, okay.
So, there's ways to do, so the whole district is on the same day at the same time. So that first day on Wednesday, the 29th is day 1. Then is day 2, day 3, we come back on Tuesday, the 4th, that's day 4 for everybody.
Gotcha.
Day 5, and then Thursday, the 6th becomes day 1 again. And just do it that way. So that way, you could have the same weekday for parents for convenience, but the kids wouldn't miss academics on the same thing all the time, so.
I think that I can strongly support that in terms of working parents. And also just in terms of kids always knowing when they
Consistency.
have school, when they don't have school, being able to kind of manage after-school program, stuff like that.
Mhm.
So you're still working with the leadership team
Mhm.
on figuring out how these things.
Still working on that. So I could, I could have another draft for you on the 29th or on the February 8th, depending on where we are. We're gonna meet on it tomorrow and go through some of this, but it'll be in much better shape the next time you see it. This was really rough.
This is just and just for next year, because the idea of only one full week, I don't know why no one else is bothered by one full week in December, but in January, because next year it's actually 5 weeks,
Right.
to put, instead of, take out December, take out September, December, June, and add a day in January. I know you have the 1st and the 21st.
Yeah.
But they're 5 weeks. I don't know.
So if
It
you do
feel-
that,
it
you'd
feels
end up with
like-
January being only one full week of school in January.
But doesn't that feel not as bad as December? I don't know. That's just my
Depends if
idea.
you're in the classrooms or not.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause January they have midterms.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
December, they probably won't. They're ready to, they need a little break. Okay, I'm not in the classroom, that's a good point.
But we'll
I
have
want them in
another-
the classroom, they want them out in
Yeah,
December.
we'll have
I want them there full days and you want them out, I get it.
We'll have another draft.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll have another draft for you.
okay. All right, next item on the agenda, the other
Bless
item
you.
since January 3rd.
So I just wanted to give you an update on a couple of insurance claims we've had to make over the last couple of weeks. The first one happened here at the high school. We had a incident at boys' basketball practice where they were practicing long passes and ball hit one of the sprinkler heads. And it was one of the sprinkler heads that did not have a cage on it. Some had cages, some did not. So it broke that valve and water came out. We had up to 2,000 gallons of water on the floor that we just redid. So our guys and, Michael and Jerry and everyone did a great job. They cleaned it all up and we brought in Service Master right away, called Maya, our insurance, and they got Service Master over to us for the cleanup. And as of yesterday, they just took the tubes that were in the gym floor that were blowing hot air underneath the gym floor to try to dry the wood. So it's really, the cupping of the wood has really been contained in between the 3-point lines in the middle of the court, center court, that whole area. So we have some minor cupping there. The good news is that we feel like it can all be sanded out and redone, so that it's not going to be board replacement and redoing the whole gym floor. So that's the great news. It's okay to use right now, we're using it, but we feel like it's going to be an insurance claim, so insurance is going to have us redo that whole thing. It's not coming out of our FY18 budget or FY19 budget, and we're going to wait till everyone gets out, so we're figuring, we scheduled it already for the last week in June to do that. So they'll do similar to what they did this past summer, but they're going to probably contain it just to the area where the basketball court is. The area that is still wood when the bleachers are up is fine. That's really a good spot. We didn't want any issues around coloration, so that you have when you do a wood floor, you can tell if some part has been sanded and another one replaced. It never matches. So we want to have the whole thing done, and the insurance at this point, the adjuster supports that. So we did Michael did a great job with that, orchestrating the whole. Getting the insurance folks in here, the adjusters coming in. Jerry was great with that too as well. So that's our first insurance claim, and then a couple of days later.
Do you need a deductible on that, or is it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. They're working with Meyer on that right now, what the deductible is going to be. And then a couple of days later, we had a couple of pipes freeze and burst in the kitchen area of the Blake kitchen, which really it couldn't have happened in a better place because there's floor drains there. So the water that came down went in the floor drains. We had scheduled our guys to come in. When we have cold snaps like this, we have guys come in and do building checks just to make sure. And sure enough, did a building check on that Sunday, and that's what we found. So those pipes were replaced immediately. Board of Health were great. They worked with us, came over and gave us a clean bill of health the next day to serve lunch. The problem that we lost three pieces of equipment in there. So we lost a steamer, one of the ovens, and what was the other thing? The mixer, Michael?
Yeah.
And the mixer that we lost. So those are all part of the claim too, to get new equipment. But our cafeteria staff did a great job. We did some off-site lunches. Parents were cooperative with my request to have as many kids as possible bring their lunch. So we had limited lunch that next day, and that went really well. So the following day, we were right up at full capacity with the kitchen. So 2 claims in a week, one weather-related, one not. But I think it's that everyone came together really well. It was great to have good staff together. The custodians came in, did clean up. They were on call, came right in, did a great job. Jerry, it's great to have Jerry on board. There isn't anything he hasn't seen in a building, so it's worked out really well. But that's what I wanted to add to our.
Does insurance cover the cages for all the sprinkler heads?
It's a good question. I'm not sure about that. But those weren't very expensive. I mean, they had to come and repair, so it would cover that. You think, Michael? Is that part of the claim? We're still working on the claim because there are certain parts that we have to put together. But the cages were the least of our worries. Yeah, they're pretty cheap. But they replaced those on there. So we spent a good amount of money getting that floor redone over the summer. So to have that happen.
It didn't impact a lot of. I know it impacted your vacation and Robert's, a lot of other people's. So
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
serious issue.
Yeah, no doubt.
Mhm.
No doubt.
We thank you for taking care of it.
Thanks. That's all I had on that, Madam Chair.
Okay. And I'm sure the person that did it felt awful. Accidents happen, that's why you have insurance.
Mhm.
Right. Okay, well, thank you. On the agenda for old business, the fiscal year 19 budget.
So we are meeting with the warrant committee on Friday just to have a quick conversation. They wanted to give us a reaction to the initial budget presentation and what they feel like the numbers are. So we're going to have that quick meeting on Friday afternoon. And then Michael and I are looking at reducing that number to get it to a more palatable number for the town, as we have in the past. So one of the things that we talked to Mike Sullivan about, this is the exact same point we were last year, 6.75%. So that's, we're working off the same numbers as we did last year. So we're going forward and looking into our revolving accounts and seeing how we can offset the budget, and more information comes in every few days. The information that we're getting from the state and the federal government is not great. you know, they're talking, we got an email today from the Superintendent Association saying that circuit breaker is looking at, is an area that they're looking to reduce next year, and partly because the state governments don't have a clear sense of what the federal government is doing. So the federal government is cutting programs, doing this, doing that, and there's not a real clear indication of what's gonna happen at the federal level. So as I said at the last meeting, you know, we've lost over 120,000 this year in state and federal grants, and we expect our federal grants to go down again. So I'm not sure what's gonna go on there. None of us know at this point, so we feel like we're gonna be conservative and not plan for level service on those federal grants, looking at a reduction. Circuit breaker, as you know, last year we were very conservative with circuit breaker, and we were budgeting 65% near the end. The warrant, I'm going to call them finance committee. The warrant committee, you know, we were kind of pushed at the end there to make additional cuts, and to do that, we put it up to 70%, and we ended up getting 65%. So we took a hit there as well. So, you know, those kinds of things that are really important in our budget, especially in a district this size, where you really count on that circuit breaker to offset your special education cost. You know, that's a concern for us going forward. But we're going to be working through that next couple of weeks, and we'll have our presentation for the public hearing. We're also putting together a line item budget that will be online prior to the public hearing. So if folks want to get in the weeds on that, they certainly can. I think we try to do a really good job of synthesizing the most important points of the budget so that we can present that at that meeting. But if people need more detail, that'll be available to them.
I think it would be helpful, Jeff, to put on there the number we discussed last time in terms of what we budget for a full-time equivalent teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Chris asked tonight about the arrangement at the middle school. I mean, we're all concerned about that. The cost of maintaining the 3 clusters is significant. I think it would be helpful for people to know, you know, what it costs to run a classroom.
Sure.
I mean, just the teacher salary doesn't really cover what it costs to run a classroom, but that's it's a good starting point.
And there's no conversations about abandoning the cluster model at the middle school. I mean, there's no conversations about that. The conversation is, instead of having 3 of them, having 2 of them.
It is more difficult with 2. I agree, and I think we certainly would have to restore it in 2 years' time. There's no question about that. But
so, you know, we'll put that together, and let's not forget that every year that, at least that I've been here, we've gone through that presentation, and it's never ended up being the same. I mean, I put in that presentation that the district should be paying for iPads for all parents. You guys told me to get it out of there. So it changes. I mean, that's how it works. And even though, you know, you guys vote to have an adopted budget at that next meeting, there's still many changes that happen before town meeting. And we know that, but, you know, I just want to make sure that everyone else knows that it's a fluid process, and, you know, there are changes throughout the whole process. And what appears on the 29th may not be there at town meeting, you know.
yeah, I mean, from our perspective, all the money should be spent on the schools, but we also need the roads plowed and the police department to be staffed and things like that. So we get it.
So that's where we are with that, and we'll have more information on what the warrant committee is thinking after our meeting on Friday.
So the next item on the agenda are donations.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I ask you to approve the following donations. Blake Middle School, $14 for lost books. Blake Middle School, $3,171.88 from Grin and Barrett, which is the photography company. $1,000 from PTO to Auditorium Sound System. $1,160 from PTO to Midsummer's Night's Dream Performance. $1,200 from PTO to Kill a Mockingbird Performance. Those are all at Blake Middle School. And then a district-wide donation from Leaders Environmental, $200 to the Medfield Public Schools. I ask that you approve those as written.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved. The next item is the superintendent's report to the committee.
So I have one update on the student services search. So I've talked with a consultant twice now that is doing some of the recruiting for us. She's been very successful with the conversations. Just got word this morning when I looked on School Spring that one of the real target people that we're looking for did end up applying over the weekend, which is great. You know, and it was someone that she had really targeted and someone we had talked about prior. So that was excellent. And so I think we have, I want to say 21 or 22 applicants at this point. It closes on Friday. And then we're looking at the week of the 22nd to do a kickoff meeting with that group of folks, and then begin interviews on the week of the 29th. So probably that, you know, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday timeframe on the week of the 29th. But once I get, again, I'm going over that with the leadership team tomorrow, so I'll have some more information for you there. But we're still in the timeframe where we could make a recommendation to the school committee, or at least have someone in line prior to February vacation, which is what our goal was. So that's what we're hoping for. And if you remember that this committee will forward, you know, 1, 2, no more than 3 people to the school committee for final selection.
Excellent.
But moving along, I think that it's been interesting having the recruiter. She called me over vacation, and we talked a little bit about, you know, what she was doing and how she was doing. And she had identified someone that wanted to talk to me. And she gave me the person's number, and I said, well, how about you call that person and tell them to call me? Because that's why she said, oh, that makes sense. You know, that's why we're doing this, is so that I don't have to call those people. I said, I know her superintendent really well, and I think that, you know, I'm not gonna make that phone call, so. But that's been going well, and she has some pretty good contacts, so.
Excellent.
Happy with
And
that.
the final interview is before us in a public setting, just like for yours, right?
Yes. It can be if you want it to be. It doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to
Whatever
be.
you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we should think about that, because I know
Right.
that fact can discourage some folks from participating in the
It
final
sure
round.
can.
Yeah.
And just some feedback that I got from a couple of candidates last year, one of whom has been in some really big districts and some really big searches. And she commented that it was the most rigorous interview process she's ever been through.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or bad. I just know that was her feedback, that that initial phase of those interviews, what she felt was more rigorous than some of the really big districts she's been in successful districts, so, for what it's worth. And then for recognition, just want to recognize our high school kids that were at, losing my train of thought now.
Field After Dark.
Thank you. Medfield After Dark. I actually didn't get to see it this year, but I got some YouTube videos sent to me. I just think that is some of the funniest stuff that our kids do. And the YouTube ones I got over the weekend did not disappoint. So congratulate them. They're just, you know, that's some incredible talent, and kids have a good time with that. I know that was well attended, so congratulations. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, so, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry, one more
Oh.
thing, that just remind people that Medfield Talks is tomorrow night.
Right, right.
Sarah Ward is speaking, and she'll be there at 7 o'clock looking at executive function. So we have about 100 folks that have RSVP'd already. So we're looking to get more there, so.
I just want to, we done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. I thought so. I saw that, I thought you were calling, but I wasn't sure. I just want to thank the building and ground staff and the DPW staff for helping us get open on Friday. I think, you know, a lot of schools canceled, and every school has to make its own decision about what's safe for their kids, but I was around town in the morning on Friday. It was clear to me it was a good decision, and as I mentioned, my wife works in another district where they called it off, and she was pleased to have the day off, but she would, you know, she's been doing this long enough to know that she would much rather have it in June.
Right.
So, you know, I'm glad that we were able to get open and safe. And, you know, and obviously we did have an issue come up tonight about safety going forward. We should do what we can to work with DPW on that. But I really appreciate all the work to get us open this time around.
I also went to Medfield After Dark, and one of the things I want to say is that having taken more than I should probably ought to have taken playwriting classes, the fact that our seniors are at the point where they can actually make the leap to writing continuous dialogue in skits that are anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes is really a level of sophistication that I would not necessarily have thought of at that level of high school. And I really want to just commend them on that.
Yeah, they're impressive.
On the pure academic and kind of artistic part of that is not easy. I think it's some of the hardest writing out there. So. And your kid rocked it on the keyboard, Francis, and my niece was in Medfield After Dark as well, so it was wonderful to see her.
So I heard it was brilliant. The stand-up comic, Francis was saying, was
Oh, my goodness gracious.
hysterical.
She was great.
So, these kids are amazing, and kudos to the staff, getting the maintenance people as well. And even just going through these halls, you think about all the work that goes into cleaning these floors with the salt and everything. That's great. Thank you. So,
Right.
we're very fortunate here.
Okay, so for future agenda items, it's the fiscal year 19 budget public hearing. We'll have the presentation from Susan Cowell regarding the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey
And
presentation.
that's gonna be the February meeting.
That's,
That worked for Susan.
Okay,
best,
okay.
the February meeting.
so we'll put that off till February, not the next meeting.
Right.
So we'll do the high school handbook revisions, the new grant procedure handbook, and the student activity policy. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.